Hey, welcome back. This is the next installment of Third Party Threat Hunters podcast, and this week I've got Vincent Scales with me from Verizon. I'm going to do a longer introduction of Vincent here real quickly, but to this week I wanted to say who's not here, who is Al Molnick. I know Al went on to do a new role, and one of the things that they asked him not to do was the podcast anymore. So apparently, as Vincent put it earlier, I'm a reputational risk for Al. So shout out to Al. We miss him, but hopefully I can carry the bucket of water long enough for Vincent to stay interested in the conversation. Vincent, I'm going to just read from your introduction here, make sure I don't miss anything, Vincent, because you got a really great resume here. So Vincent is an enterprise program leader for over 15 years of experience building, delivering, and operating IT and shared services programs in Fortune 500 environments, both from the perspective of the outsourcer as well as a service provider. Currently, Vincent's the director of Verizon's third-party risk management program, as well as the chairman of the board for the Third Party Risk Association, which I am a big proponent of. So, woo for that. Holds a BA and from Northern Arizona University and a master's in BA. From Arizona State University. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona, along with his girlfriend and their two Labradoodles. Oh, I have a golden doodle. So there we go. That's why I knew I liked you automatically.
All right.
And so, Vincent, you want to say anything else about yourself before we launch into the tirade of the day?
No, yeah, because I didn't think you were going to read that whole thing. I would have been
sorry
happy
about that. Yeah, when people do the same thing to me at like conferences and stuff, and I really need to shorten that. I'm not that nice. I just am not.
Oh man, I hope you weren't disappointed when I introduced you at the conference in 2023 and said Greg is a rock star and a published author. Which, by the way, guys, Building Zero Trust in Third Parties comes out in October.
I can't wait for that. It's funny. Thank you. It's funny. I get as the date approaches. It should be end of September, early October, as we see it shipped out of Amazon. And the confirmation for me is one is I already I've only done 2 books now, but I always pre-order, so I know when I get it, right? And then so anyways, yeah, I'm sort of a dork that way. And then I get a box, so you get a certain number free from the publisher. And nothing's free from publishers, by the way. But you get it free from the publisher, and so you get about 10, I think. So the first one I always take out of a box, and I call it Precious, and then I put it in a plastic box. So at least this will be the second one in the plastic box. So anyway, so yeah, no, thanks for the mention. And I want to also mention too the Third Party Risk Association, since we talked about it, having its virtual conference coming up here in late September, September 27th. It's a 10 to 5 Eastern time, 9 to 4 Central. What was the, do you happen to recall again, what was the topic?
We're focusing this year on operational risk and resilience, as we're seeing there's these macroeconomic pressures, and as we put more and more of our business as companies into third parties, the resilience factor of those supply chains is never been more important. So we're going to have a great track of speakers together to talk about how we can really focus on managing the day-to-day operational risk and build resilience into our business.
That's right. And that's one of the 3 legs of the CIA triad, right? Availability, resilience, right? So it's an important, it's one of the 3 pillars, and it's something that we should all pay attention to. I've gotten a lot of interest from resiliency folks in the third party space because of that reason. We rely heavily on third parties for more than I think we realize in some organizations. And when they go out, for whatever reason, we suddenly realize that third leg of the stool is missing, and we're falling over. And then the in-person one, which, by the way, I went to this year and loved it, is next year, April 9th to the 12th in Phoenix. Well, I see somebody. I know somebody who's in Phoenix. Oh wait, Vincent, you're in Phoenix.
I am in Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix. And so, tell us about the venue and just kind of a little bit of more about it.
Yeah, for anybody who has gone to our last 2 in-person conferences in Austin and in Nashville, first off, thanks for the support. But you would see the explosive growth of the conference, and in fact, we were kind of on top of each other this year here in Nashville. So we're going to be at the beautiful Sheraton Phoenix downtown in Phoenix, Arizona. And given that it's in early April, it's really kind of the peak season for beautiful weather. So be a good opportunity for folks like y'all on the East Coast to get out of the kind of cold doldrums, enjoy some beautiful desert Phoenix weather. But
Yeah. Well, but before it gets June, and it's fry an egg on the pavement time, right? So,
yeah, don't
but
come right now. It was
no,
117 yesterday, and we broke the all-time record for
yeah.
temperatures on the 28th of August. So don't come
Ye-
right now.
Years ago, when I lived on the West Coast, I got an offer to work for. I was working for Wells. They wanted me to go full time, and so the offer was to move to Phoenix or to Chandler, right? Chandler,
Sure.
Arizona, where they have a big location, and the big sell was that they would give me covered parking because you had to have covered parking, given that it's 150 degrees and your car bakes. Anyways, uh, I'm really looking forward to the conference. Again, the fact that it's a little bit longer is great, and you're going to have a lot more. And I think as you said, you guys are going to do tracks too, right? So it's going to be even a little bit more to follow and ability to do a lot more engagement with subject matter experts, which I'm looking forward to as well. So I always learn so much.
We are, and we've gotten that feedback that there's really a greater desire from our attendees to be able to participate in even more sessions. So we're going to be making the conference an additional day. We're going to be using that additional space to have another track. And more importantly, we kind of heard from our attendees, we're going to be using most of this time to add additional slots for tool demos and Q&As with service providers, because I think that a lot of folks who attended really took a lot away from being able to get exposure to new offerings in the industry and really to interface directly with the people who are building these tools and who are
Right.
offering these tools. So
Yeah.
it's awesome. I cannot wait. Hopefully we'll see you again there.
Yeah, and the reason why we bring it up is that the registration opens on October 1. And so there'll be probably some early bird specials. So you want to keep an eye out for that, as well as just more information about the event itself. So keep an eye out, October 1st, big date, to keep an eye out for. And I'll definitely be an early. Well, also October 1 is when you do a call for submissions too, right? So any
Yep.
practitioners listening who want to participate as a speaker, and I love doing speaker work because I get a free pass then. So, and I'll be perfectly transparent, not just for that event, but for all the other events I go to. I'm speaking at InfoSec World and IC Squared. Those are the third party. The one thing I'll say is the TPRA event is affordable. It's much more approachable in terms of the cost, and I love the way that TPRA does that as a not for profit. I will not say the same is true of InfoSec World or ICS Squared. At times, they can be kind of expensive to approach. So if you're looking to get in on any of these events on a dime, speak. Volunteer to speak, submit a paper. I like to see other people speak because that's how I learn. Um, Despite what my wife and kids say, I'm not a know-it-all, and I really do want to understand. And I've got some great ideas that I've included in my books over the years from other practitioners. I didn't come up all this genius on my own. So let's transition into the actual what I thought we could really sink our teeth into, which was software vulnerabilities, especially zero-day vulnerabilities, and can we all get over move it? If I never hear the word move it again, it'll be too soon. And it comes on top of just countless other zero-day vulnerability issues that have plagued us as third-party practitioners in the cyberspace in particular. We could say it actually started before that, but SolarWinds, I think, is the seminal event of the last 3 or 4 years where we saw a concerted effort by APTs, advanced persistent threat actors, to really go after that supply chain using software vulnerabilities. And then you see things like Hafnium and what was the other one? There's been a half a dozen. Oh, Log4j, right?
Log4j, there's
Yeah,
been so many, I'm not sure which one you mean.
yeah. So give me your perspective on how we're dealing with this as an industry and what you think some of the possible ways that we could solve for it or at least start troubleshooting it.
Greg, it's so interesting how you kind of highlight the prevalence of APTs using third parties as attack vectors for getting AIM trading to primes, because increasingly when I'm talking to business leaders internal to my firm here at Verizon, that's one of the main things I'm sharing with them, that the importance of third-party risk management and the need to now be going even deeper than we ever have in the past with regards to due diligence and assessment of engagements is that we aren't being attacked directly anymore. It isn't profitable or likely that, anybody outside of an APT will be successful in directly penetrating our defenses. However, there is so much software that we're now using, and increasingly we are doing more and more with third parties, that that's become the obvious inroad into getting access to sensitive data. And so I would kind of highlight first, if we think about the evolution, Greg, of third-party risk management over even the last 5 to 6 years, clearly this has been a discipline of risk management for, probably 2 decades now. But I think that we can all agree that TPRM has really hit that kind of hockey stick of growth in the last 4 to 5 years. I saw a factor from Matthew Moog at OneTrust, and I'm going to fuzz this a little bit, but I think it was something like a full 2/3 of TPRM programs that OneTrust is aware of are less than 5 years old. And so when you think about that evolution over the last 5 years of, take the average TPRM program, I think you went from a supplier level due diligence where you're just struggling to get your arms around the tiering around who you actually have in your environment. And then you moved into perhaps engagement specific due diligence, actually kind of detecting the inherent risk of specific engagements with those third parties. But now what I'm positing is I think that as an industry, we need to move towards really product and service specific due diligence as related to those engagements, because until you get down into the actual products or services that are being procured from these third parties, there's no way that you'll have any awareness of the type of software that's being utilized in the engagement. And Greg, I'd be curious, because I know that you're kind of deeper into the the application security and software side than I am, but it feels as though increasingly more and more solutions are leveraging open source, or at the very least are leveraging publicly available libraries as a
Right.
component or a subcomponent to the software they might offer you. So, I mean, I'm curious on your take. How should we be looking at these software acquisitions or these services that heavily leverage software?
Yeah. So having come from a software development, security development lifecycle program at Cisco, which I managed the security development lifecycle at Cisco for a number of years. That's how I met a number of folks that I work with, including Chris Romeo in this space and others who are also passionate about the secure development. Is the use of open source has bitten us a number of times in the past. And Heartbleed is the most obvious one, where OpenSSL had a vulnerability. The assumption in the community, and this is still the prevalent thought, unfortunately, is that, well, if it's open source, that means people are looking at it and checking it for security. And the answer is no, that's just not true. The exact opposite is happening in most cases. People are just ignoring it because it's free. So it's like there's a reason why Milwaukee's Best is a cheaper beer than others. I've drunk it in the past, but it produces a really bad hangover for a reason. It's cheap liquor. The reason why you get a bad hangover when you use open source software is something similar. Is you've not accounted for the fact that it's not free. You need to still track this stuff. You still need to understand and do vulnerability testing against it and application software testing against it, which nobody does, or at least not enough, right? Had it been not for somebody checking their SolarWinds software against some common practices, might not we have found the vulnerabilities that were exploited and the work done by the APT? Might not have, but it's more likely we would have if people had been testing and trying to validate what the heck was going on with the software. If we'd had things like secure code signing, right? Those we don't get enough of just simple things. Technologies that have been around for 20 years plus, like code signing, are still slow to adoption in spaces that we should just be saying as customers, no, that's not okay. It all it requires is a PKI, a primary a key infrastructure, private key infrastructure, and those are not expensive anymore. AWS or Azure can set those up for pennies on the dollar, depending on your usage of them. So anyway, S-bombs are something that you and I've talked about as a potential solution, but it has its own issues. I'm curious kind of where you've come down on both S-bombs and the idea of code signing and kind of how you're looking for it in your third party risk leadership.
Yeah, Greg, it's such a struggle because with the macroeconomic pressures that we're seeing, I'm pretty sure that every other TPRM practitioner or security professional who might be listening to this is in a similar position to where you and I know we both are, which is that business units are pushing risk management and security teams to go faster, to do more with less, and to not slow down the business. And I think that when you start talking about secure code signing, um, or really S-bombs, I think that folks are hesitant to add additional potential friction to the process of bringing a third party
Yeah,
in.
I mean, there's already perception, and it's not an inaccurate one, that we've overloaded vendors with questionnaires and
Yeah.
requirements and that kind of stuff. And I do get it, because I can see both sides of the fence. I have in past roles played the consumer of my product or my capabilities as a former vendor. I think the challenge is that both of us are in spaces, and a lot of us are in spaces that regulatory requirements are pushing us in this direction. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to go into a compliance mode just to get the regulator on my back, because that's not what I'm going to do in my space. There's a compliance person in my company that does that. That's great. She does a great job at it, but that's not what cybersecurity and what we're charged to do as cybersecurity professionals in a third-party risk space, at least from my view. And I know that's one you share. I think the issue of things like S-bombs, which, by the way, are software bill of materials for those who are not familiar with the acronym. It's a list of ingredients like you get on the back of a cereal box, right? And that does present some solutions. I think the challenge that I've been presented with is because I was gleefully sort of zipping down the S-bomb path myself, let's go, S-bomb, send the solution. And then Chris Romeo threw the bucket of cold water and he said, well, who the heck's going to take the data? Oh, damn. I hate reality, because the fact is we get so much data already, Vincent, that we don't do a lot with, unfortunately. Who's going to consume the S-bombs? And like I said, it's the back of a cereal box. So you've got monoglucose macamazamute that you don't know what it is. And you got to go find a nutritionist, the equivalent of a nutritionist, to look at the cereal, the contents of your S-bomb to know, is this dangerous? Because this looks like it might be. This is a really long word. Maybe I should talk to the cybersecurity guys.
And Greg, I think that's where having a close partnership with that nutritionist in your firm is so important, because
you're right.
It's unreasonable for my team to have a full understanding of the hazards of maltodextrin or of red 40 dye. However, simply having the ability to have that S-bomb, and far be it for me to say Chris Romeo's wrong, but I would take it a step farther and propose.
No, I don't think he said that they were wrong. It's just that if we don't think of how to ingest them and just think that the S-bomb is going to solve it, then we've missed half the solution. I think was his point. But you're right on, Vincent. You're right on.
I agree with that, and I would use a paradigm that I've heard before that I've really embraced as my own. We'll call it the "so what" paradigm. All right, you got the S-bomb. So what?
So what?
What are you going to do with that? And for us here, Verizon,
I'm going to paper the walls in the men's room.
Pretty much. Maybe I can cover up these blank walls behind me with all
the SOC 2 reports I have.
Oh gosh, I could do the whole house. But what I would point out is that obviously you're working at a large regulated bank. I work at a telecom that supports the federal government. So we're both beholden to similar regulations, and there's a regulatory impetus to gather those S-bombs to ensure at a skin deep level that there are no components from denied parties. Think about your China's, your Iran, so so on and so forth, Syria. However, going a level deeper, let's think about even for a fairly new TPRM program, maybe a firm that doesn't have the strongest cybersecurity apparatus. I would posit that there's still value in the nutritional information of the S-bomb to be used in a reactive mode when vulnerabilities are discovered,
There you
because
go.
let's
If you could
point
catalog it, like you said, Hafnium comes out or Log4j, you can go and see who's got the Log4j vulnerability and off to the races. I get where you're going with it.
right.
Yeah, yep,
And so, for anybody who's heard me speak either at the TPRA conferences or in industry, I'm a huge proponent of investment in GRC solutions. I think that there are a lot of awesome TPRM SaaS solutions that are great as a start, but I think that in order to really be at a high level of maturity, some sort of enterprise GRC platform and tooling is necessary.
yeah,
Because to think about that cataloging, Greg,
yeah,
we're
exactly.
ingesting S-bombs into our enterprise GRC, which allows our threat management, threat intelligence folks to take a look at that. If you want to take
Yeah,
that a step farther, if you have this integrated view of the particular libraries, software applications, components, what have you, that could be in play either in your enterprise or connected to your enterprise, you can
yeah,
look in that GRC repository. And if you are a mature TPRM program, I think this is table stakes, but be able to understand the specific data elements, the amount of data, what sort of
yeah.
connections to the enterprise
Okay.
the third party has. And now all of a sudden, TPRM, all the way up front during the onboarding of the supplier, during the onboarding and vetting of that engagement, they're now creating value across the entire life cycle. Because down the road, when those
Yeah,
threat management folks, when folks in the office of the CISO are looking to understand impact and
yeah,
understand what our vulnerability is, they now have this full complement of data to include specifics around what our true exposure is. That's where we're trying to get to at Verizon. We're already kind of on the road and have, obviously the vision and have executed this in the past in a manual fashion, but
right.
getting there in an automated way. Because now think about security rating services like a BitSite or security
Yeah,
scorecard, threat intelligence feeds,
yeah,
pipe into your
exactly.
GRC. They can drive your response automatically.
Yeah. Well, and it gets into it's where I think third party risk sometimes should think of itself which is a vulnerability management program to some extent, right? These things are all vulnerabilities, and we're trying to manage them in a risk based fashion. Um, and it's why I don't think the third party risk program should be in a GRC space. They should be in a vulnerability management or in a cyber ops space. In the cyber, and if you're I'm talking about in your cyber teams, not the third party
Sure.
risk enterprise teams, because they're operational, not not governance, right? Governance should be telling them how to do it or guiding them on how to do it, not doing it themselves. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox and I had you for a second. Um, anyway, no, it's just I've seen it. I think it's why a lot of, and particularly in sometimes in the finance space, we see a lot of it done in the compliance check the box mode because finance was one of the first spaces with the OCC regulatory guidance. And so, what do people see when they do regulations? I just need to get the regulators off my back, so they start trying to figure out ways to just crank it out. Now, I will say the regulators have gotten hep to that, and I don't know how your experiences have been, and I'm not giving anything under the covers that I shouldn't. They know what they're doing now,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I see them asking questions that are probing. They're actually reading the material, which is something new, and they appear to have subject matter experts reading the material. So I'm not getting questions that Scooby Doo could have asked me about cybersecurity. I'm getting actual questions that somebody clearly, I don't know if it's CSSP, but they clearly know what they're asking me is asking some delving questions. So the check the box mentality won't fly anymore either with the regulators. So I think we have to get out of that attitude of check the box. And to get out of that attitude, you have to start looking for vulnerabilities. And that's the third part threat hunting piece, right? That's where I coined that term, was to get out of that compliance mode. And we should be treating ourselves like the operations teams in cyber, for the cyber risk domain, at least, to be focused in on looking for risks. Stop just trying to get past the next vendor, as it were, right? Let me see. I wanted to pivot real quick, if we could, to the trainings that TPRA is offering, because I know one I've been teaching, and we're teaching a third party cyber risk assessor training
Yep.
certification, which I'm doing some of the trainings myself as well as others. And we have a class coming up. I want to say, check the website, but I believe there's one coming up in October. I'll have to check again, but I believe we checked the website. It's in October. And I know that, and talking to Julie, you guys had some other certifications you guys are working on. Did you have a chance to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so we're actually now working on a more general third-party risk management professional certification. And
Excellent.
the goal there is really, Greg, you were so instrumental in kind of translating the meat of cybersecurity,
Yeah.
third-party threat hunting into what's now the third-party cyber risk assessor certification. We're really looking to now be a bit more wide thinking in our certifications. We really want to start with cybersecurity to ensure that third-party risk management professionals who don't necessarily have the hands-on technical cybersecurity skills that they need to be successful could get access to those in a low-cost, high-quality way. But now what we're looking to do is really kind of take a step back and look at what a mature third-party risk management program looks like, and to wit, what the activities of those people working day to day on third party risk management in those practices look like. And, I would really kind of point at, understanding reporting, understanding kind of at a higher, less cyber indexed level, how to calculate the strength of controls, how to calculate and express what the controls adjusted risk rating for an engagement would be. And basically, there's also a little bit of management sprinkled in there. I would almost look at this like the SISM equivalent to a CISP or a CISA, where, the prior CTPRA is a bit more applied and focused, but SISM is really about how to actually manage and execute the deliverable.
It's not a technical exam. It's a
Exactly.
CSSP and a SISM or a managerial exam, and the training for those require technical prowess, but the test itself is on how to manage that technical ability, not how the technical ability itself. They talk about things like rainbow tables in the CSSP, but I never had a question about the rainbow tables on the exam itself. It's about how to manage the rainbow tables. What I'm really happy about with the training that you guys are doing is that it's approachable and affordable. Again, in line with how the conferences are priced and done, you get quality for the dollar, right? It's not designed. Anybody who's looked at a SANS course can have a heart attack with the cost. And I'm not bad-mouthing SANS. It's a great quality product, but you pay for it. It's expensive. Nobody will argue that. $5,000 for a 5-day course is a lot of money. I know the third-party cyber risk assessor course, generally, I think the full Monty with where you get like the sort of training and a certification and the book and everything else, it's I think $800 for for a 2-day course. It's under it's like $795 or something like that, right? So that's a vastly different price point, and I think it makes it affordable for budgets that are tight, or if somebody needs to pay out of pocket for some reason, right? It's certainly most people can't do 5,000 out of pocket, but 800 you could, or at least if you had to expense it, your manager won't have a conniption fit. And I would imagine that your generalist training will be similarly priced, which I'm sure it will be. So that'll make it also approachable. What I think is important about that isn't that it's cheap or whatever, it's affordable. It's that it makes it affordable for folks to learn how to do it better. Right. That's the reason why I wrote the first book. That's the reason why I got engaged with Julie and you guys on the training and certification. Wasn't to make a lot of money, because we don't. This is a not-for-profit. The book royalties are never going to make, and that's one thing Wiley says when you first start with them. The first thing out of the publisher's mouth is you're not going to get wealthy writing a book, a technical book. You write these things, you do these things because, one, it's your professional obligation if you're a CSSP or other certifications to help educate others and do your best to learn from that as well as teach others. But when you talked earlier about about the fact that not enough people do this, right? And that a lot of folks do this almost by rote memorization or as a compliance exercise, right? And the numbers are still self-reported. I think at 60% of organizations report that they do ad hoc or have no process around third-party risk management. That's a huge opportunity for folks to learn from this training, from the other training, from the books that we're writing, from the online articles, from the in-person and the virtual conferences, right? All those places and points to learn and help educate others about how the best practices are really important. Because to be selfish, Vincent, if more people did this, our job would be easier. So right, because if more people did the due diligence of their vendors, then that would be one less vendor that was probably a little bit dirty in terms of their cybersecurity or their own skill sets that we wouldn't have as a burden to do the work on ourselves. So more people do this, the better. We're coming up on, we're at 30 minutes, 31 to be exact. So I wanted to kind of wrap it up, make sure it doesn't too long. But do you want any parting thoughts, Vincent?
Yeah, I'm glad to have this discussion, and thanks for having me on. I would say that to your point about, absolutely, to your point about, TPRM gets easier the more and more people do it. I think when we look at cybersecurity, it's hit its hockey stick and it's just keeps on ripping. I mean, there was definitely a time earlier in my career, 12, 15 years ago, when cybersecurity, didn't really even exist in my business unit. Clearly there were people doing cybersecurity somewhere else in the company, but it was not woven into what I was doing. I hesitate to say this. I wasn't focused at all on cybersecurity, 15 years ago.
I did IT. It just happened to be cybersecurity on the side.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were IT guys and ladies who were doing that stuff for me. But now when we see, and obviously I hate to bring up the fact that I might be sort of a compliance person, when we see the DOJ, the Department of Justice's recent guidance to compliance programs that third-party risk management needs to exist, and not only that, vendor management, as they're calling it, needs to be woven into the very operations of the business. I think you're seeing that, that's that kind of third-party threat hunting. It's being a more active manager of third-party engagements, truly managing those relationships beyond simply receiving the widget or the service that you paid for.
I agree. Yeah.
But anyway,
everybody is somebody else's vendor, right?
That's
everybody's selling somebody to something, right? So all the interconnectedness means that all the incidents, events, and breaches we keep seeing because of the heightened cyber activity, blah blah blah. You'd think I could do a podcast. Is going to inevitably mean that you have more third-party breaches, right? And to end it with a segue into the latest book is the mathematical inevitability of a breach of your third parties. That's the sort of leading statement. You are mathematically inevitable to have a third party event. It's just going to happen because you probably have more than two vendors, right? You have probably dozens or thousands of vendors, and just by sheer math, you are going to have a third party event. Get ready for it. Figure out how you're going to solve for it. Zero Trust is one option to do that. There are many others, but start planning a TPRM program and engage with Third Party Risk Association. Grab a book. There's a couple of them out there that I know of that you might want to partake of, or others. But and another great book I'll give a free plug to is this gentleman's book, Software Transparency by Chris Hughes and some others. Chris Hughes and Tony Turner. I've been reading it. Great book, and we'll kind of talk about a lot of the software vulnerability stuff we've been talking about here as well. So thanks again for coming on, Vincent. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely, Greg. Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Cheers.